Hello everyone and welcome back once again. In this video we are going to learn about GCP compute services. So let's look at the learning objectives. So we are going to discuss on the overview of GCP compute services followed by a discussion around App Engine, the Compute Engine, Kubernetes Engine, the Cloud Functions, and we will be having a demo on how to launch a VM in GCE, that is Google Compute Engine. And after that, we will be wrapping up the session with discussion around use cases of compute services. So let's get started. So now let's have a closer look into GCP compute services. Okay, so compute services are a critical component of any of the cloud platform. So why do we need a compute services? Basically, you write your code and you want to deploy your code somewhere, right? So these compute services basically are used for deploying your code onto any of the compute services. So when it comes to compute services, GCP offers a wide range of compute services where you can deploy your code. The first one is the App Engine. That is basically platform as a service where you bring your piece of code and you just deploy it on App Engine and you will get a URL, and this URL you can use for executing your code on the App Engine, right? The next is the Compute Engine. So basically this Compute Engine provides you more control over your code. You bring in a piece of code and this Compute Engine it provides you a virtual machine, and this virtual machine you can install so many softwares and basically whatever you want you can deploy in that, and you can place your code in here and you will be able to run your code. So this is what the compute engine provides, a virtual machine which is more under your control. The next thing is the Kubernetes engine. So basically this is an orchestration platform and it uses containers. So you package your code in a container and bring it to Kubernetes engine. You deploy your code here, and this Kubernetes engine is responsible for maintaining your code. It will be taking up your code and it will be forming a container, and it will be responsible for managing the container, whether by scaling up, scaling down, number of pods that you want to create. All these things are managed by Kubernetes engine. Nowadays this Kubernetes engine is in demand right now, and the demand for the virtual machines are going down and the Kubernetes engine is taking over, right? And the next thing is the cloud functions. In here, the cloud function basically operates as a serverless. That means that you bring in your piece of code or write your code on these cloud functions, and after that you don't have to worry about anything. So we will look into more details in each of these going forward. Now let's have a more closer look on the App Engine. So as discussed, App Engine is one of the first compute services that was offered by Google, and it's a platform as a service, right? And you can say that App Engine is a fully managed platform for deploying web apps to scale, right? So what does it mean by fully managed? That means that the developers don't have to worry about anything like provisioning, management, scaling, security. All these things are taken care by App Engine. The developers don't have to worry about anything. They just have to bring their code, and when the traffic comes in, the App Engine will be responsible for scaling up the containers for number of requests, and when the traffic is down it is responsible for scaling it down, right? So it's a fully managed platform and it supports multiple languages, maybe it is Java, Python or PHP or any other language. It is very well supported. You can write your code on any language and bring it to App Engine, and it will be responsible for running your code. So App Engine is available in two environments, and these are standard and flexible environment, right? So the standard environment, basically when you deploy your code on the standard environment, it runs in the sandbox. When you deploy it in the standard environment, you don't have much control over your code. Whereas if you choose the flexible environment, you have more control over your code. You can manage, you can choose the dependencies that you want, and you can have more control over your code. Basically, this uses the Docker to deploy and scale the apps, right? Now let's have a more closer look into compute engine. So as I told earlier, Compute Engine provides you the option to create a virtual machine. So this virtual machine can be anything. You can install Linux, you can install Windows or any operating system of your choice on this Compute Engine. And it runs in the same manner as other of its own Google services like YouTube or other Google services, right? Now the VMs that you create are basically based on the machine types with the varied CPU and the RAM. If your requirement is to have more number of CPU cores, of course you can select that in the CPU configuration, and the RAM that is required for doing your job, that you can select it. Of course, these are virtual CPUs and RAMs, right? Persistence is available through standard and SSD disk. What does that mean? Typically, when you create a VM and you install softwares on it and you create anything, when you shut down that VM, all the things are lost, right? So that's a typical behavior of a virtual machine. So this persistence is basically available through standard or SSD. You can attach a SSD disk for allowing the persistence. Now the VMs are charged minimum of 1 minute and 1 second increment after that. That means that when you start up a VM, the minimum you will be charged for 1 minute, and even after 1 minute, if your VM is started, it will be charged on a 1 second increment basis, right? There is something called sustained used discount. That means that when you are running a VM for a significant portion of the billing month, that means that if you are running your VM for a month, so you will be eligible for sustained use discount. It means that you have to pay less for using it for 1 month. There is also something called commitment use discount. That means that if you purchase in such a way that you say Google that you are going to use it for 1 year or 3 year, you will be eligible for commitment use discount, and it will be much less than the sustained use discount. So this is the way that Google charges for Compute Engine. Now let's have a look at Google Kubernetes Engine. Google Kubernetes Engine is a managed engine for deploying containerized applications that are typically managed by Kubernetes. So, Kubernetes is the industry's most powerful and most popular container orchestration engine. It's an open source project that got originated at Google, but now it's a part of a larger organization called Cloud Native Computing Foundation, right? So Google, we can say that it's one of the original founders of Kubernetes and offers a very powerful dynamic container managed environment called Google Kubernetes Engine. You can bring your container images, package them as a Kubernetes artifact, deploy them, scale them through GKE, right? Now the Kubernetes has a control plane and a worker node or multiple worker nodes. It's a typical distributed computing environment where you have a control plane managing the worker node or the data plane that is running the multiple set of worker nodes. A GKE provisions worker node as GCE VMs. So when you launch a cluster in the Google Kubernetes engine, there are two elements. One is the control plane and the other is the data plane, which is typically delivered through a set of worker nodes. Now, the Google takes care of control plane and the master nodes that are responsible for managing the entire cluster. Okay, since Google controls the control plane or the master nodes, it is called as a managed environment. What is unique about the GKE is that the concept of node pool. So what is a node pool? So node pool is a collection of homogeneous VMs that delivers either high memory or high storage throughput or high CPU involvement. The service is tightly integrated with the GCP resources such as networking, storage, monitoring. For example, when you expose a service in the GKE, it is going to be used in the load balancer. So, of course, you can attach additional storage in the form of persistent disk to the nodes. GKE delivers auto scaling, auto upgrades, or auto node repair capabilities, and these are some of the unique capabilities of GKE. I know some of the terminologies we have used here may not be familiar to you, but that's not a cause of worry. We will have a detailed look in this in further videos. Okay. let's move to Google Cloud Functions. So, Google Cloud Function is something that was lately introduced by GCP. It's a serverless execution environment for building and connecting with the cloud services. Okay, so serverless, what does that mean? It does not mean that there are no servers attached. It only means that you don't have visualization of the server. It is internally managed by the cloud provider. Okay, so what happens that you write a piece of code, and that piece of code is a kind of a function, you can say, and this function is triggered based on an event. So you have written your 10 lines of code here, and what you do, you package this as a jar, and you go to the Google Cloud Platform and you open Cloud Functions, and there you upload your jar file. So when you upload your jar file, it only knows that you have uploaded the jar file and you have deployed it on Cloud Functions, but it is not running yet. When it will run, when any event will be triggered, that time only your code will run. Okay, so this Cloud Function supports languages like JavaScript, Python, Go. Okay, so the GCP events fire a Cloud Function through a trigger. As I mentioned earlier, that you have deployed your code on the Cloud Functions, and it will only run the function when an event is generated. For example, an event includes adding an object to a storage bucket. So you have written one piece of code here, that what it does, it will take the image and it will convert the image to a thumbnail and it will store it to a storage bucket. When this event will be triggered, this event will be triggered when you will upload an image, and it will know that there is a trigger that you have generated. It will think it as a event and it will start running the code. After running the code, the output will be stored in the storage bucket, right? So trigger connects the event to the function. Okay, that's about Google Cloud Functions. So now let's get started with the demo. In this demo, we are going to launch a VM instance on our GCP platform. So for that, you have to select the project first of all, which project you want to create the VM. So I'm selecting this Techno tab. This is my channel name. So I've selected the project name. If you don't have any project listed here, you can just go ahead and create a new project from this window. I have selected the Techno tab, and after that I will go to Compute Engine, and here I will try to launch a VM instance. So you have to click on this create instance, and you have to select the configurations. I will leave the name as it is, and the region which is very near to me, that is Asia South 1, Mumbai, and the zone you can select any. I will keep it Asia South 1A, and after that you have to select the machine type. So I will keep it general purpose and the series as N1, the first generation, and after that I will select the F1 micro, that is well under my limits. It is showing an estimated cost of $5 monthly. So I will keep it F1 micro, and that will be deducted from my credit that was given by Google. So next thing is we have to select the boot disk, and for that I will select Ubuntu standard persistent disk. I will leave the size as it is, and come down here where you see the firewall, you have to select HTTP traffics. This is important because we are going to launch a web server. And then you have to click on create. It will just take a few moments and it will create a virtual machine for you. Okay, so when you see this green tick, that means that your VM instance is created, and you will see the external IP, internal IP as well. So now let's go to our Cloud Shell, and you already know in the previous video we discussed how to go to Cloud Shell. So you have to click on this here, and it will open a Cloud Shell in the half of the screen, and you can also open that in a new window. I have opened it in a new window here, and I am going to type in some commands. So the first command that I will use is gcloud compute instance list, and this will give me this error saying that you haven't selected any project yet. So let me select the project. I also need to set the project ID. For the project ID, you have to go in here and you have to select this project ID. Now you can use the same project ID here with this command. So my project is set now, and I'm in my project now. Now I have to check the list of instances that are already there here. So gcloud compute instance list, and I will get the list of instances that are there. Instance 1, ACS South 1, F1 Micro. So all these things are here. Now let me use one more command, and the command is gcloud compute SSH instance 1 and zone ACS South 1A, that is the zone that I have hosted this instance 1. So this will install SSH on my instance 1. There is a spelling mistake. Gcloud. Do you want to continue? Yes. Enter a passphrase. I will keep it blank. Blank. Okay, so it has generated SSH on my instance 1. Let me run one more command here. Sudo apt-get update. This is updating my instance. So it is done now. And now we will go to install Apache 2 on this instance. So I will give this command sudo apt-get install y Apache 2. Enter it, and this will install Apache on your instance. So it has successfully installed, and now we will give one more command for starting up this instance. Sudo systemctl start Apache 2, and this has started. Now do one thing. Now let's go to our instance here and select the external IP, open in new windows, or copy it and open it in a new window. And you can see that Apache 2.12 default page. If you see this page, that means that your instance is successfully launched and Apache 2 is successfully installed on your instance, right? So this concludes the demo, and now I hope you might be aware how to launch a VM instance on GCP. And now let's have a detailed look at the use cases on how do you use the GCP compute services, right? Now let's have a look at use cases when you should choose a particular compute services. So on the leftmost side, we have the GCE, that is compute engine, and the rightmost side we have the cloud functions, and the middle we have Kubernetes engine and the app engine. So the idea here is that when you move from left to right, you get highly customizable environment to a highly managed environment. That means that if you choose GCE, you will have the option of customizing your application to a very large extent compared to the cloud functions, right? So which compute services you should choose, that should depend upon your application, what kind of a customization you need for your application, right? If your requirement is to have a containerized environment, then you should go for GKE. If your application has a very simple requirement that event gets triggered and your application has to run on that event, at that time you should choose Cloud Functions, right? Now that's what I have tried to put it in the slide here. The Google Compute Engine is a infrastructure as a service, and its key feature is the virtual machine you will get, and it is very highly customized, right? And what kind of application you can deploy? You can deploy application which requires highly customization, your legacy applications, and all those kind of application can be accommodated by using the virtual machines. If your requirement is to use a containerized environment, then you should go for GKE, that is container as a service. Basically you can deploy your microservices and Java application jar files, right? And it's a containerized workload use case. The next is Google App Engine, and it's a platform as a service, and it's managed at the runtime. And what kind of application you can deploy? If you have a war file, a Java war file, you can deploy that on an App Engine. And the last is the Cloud Functions, that is functions as a service. And the key feature is the functions, and event-driven applications can be deployed on it. The code snippets that are triggered based on the event can be deployed on Cloud Functions, right? So this concludes the session 3. And if you have any kind of doubt, you can just go ahead and write it in the comment section. We will try to solve all your doubts. And if you have a requirement of any new video, you can just put that in the comment section. And finally, I just want to say that please subscribe to this channel, because we are putting lots of effort in making this kind of content. So with that, I'm ending the video here. See you in the next section. Thanks for watching.